Well, the first thing that happened was in late 2012, Kim and I were discussing with the commissioners the fact that there had been a lot of recommendations, a lot of conversation with licensees like yourselves and the Ohio Association of Realtors and other stakeholders about proposed ideas for modernization, updating, changes that needed to be made to our section of code, which, as you all know, is Ohio Revised Code 4735. So that conversation led to the commissioners agreeing to convene a task force, a special group of licensees and others from around the state who were going to address these issues that had been brought to our attention. So to us, as the commission and the division, it was really important that we gather a great cross-section, a very representative picture of the diversity in our licensees across the state. So what we did was we brought together 17 real estate professionals from all different types of brokerages, different practices, as you can see on this slide: commercial, industrial, residential, small offices, sole proprietor brokers, to the broker who has 25 branch offices and multiple brokers with that company. Educators, especially with regard to our pre-licensing and post-licensing educators, it was important that we hear from them, because part of the conversation that had been ongoing was, do we have enough education? Do we have the right education? And so that was critical to this mix as well. Managers and manager owners, in particular, we had a couple of members who, while their spouse or a business partner was the broker, they themselves are either a salesperson or an unlicensed part owner of that particular brokerage. As most of you, if not all of you, already know, we too have many licensees who are not realtor members. About a third of the licensees right now in the state of Ohio are non-realtor members, while the realtor organization, Ohio Association of Realtors, is one of our major stakeholders and a group with whom we work very closely, consistently and constantly. They don't represent all licensees. So again, it was important to us that we got the representation from at least one or two unlicensed folks. So to that end, and I'm going to ask Mr. Giller to also chime in here momentarily, but to that end, in January of 2013, we convened this task force. Besides the 17 members, and I know that I have at least one in the audience who I'd like to recognize, Greg Rabchak is here, and he was one of the commercial folks who was with us. Do I have anybody else who was on the task force? I didn't see anyone else. All right, so Greg and 16 of his colleagues made up that task force, along with Peg Rittenauer, who's Vice President and Legal Counsel at OAR, Kim Wells, Division Counsel, and myself as Superintendent. And Mr. Giller was there very regularly to make sure that we were staying on track as far as what the Commission wished for us to accomplish. So January is when we kicked off. We met at least monthly until October, and about mid to the end of the month of October 2013, we had concluded that we were able to come up with 11 recommendations that we had to present to the Commission for proposed changes or updates to ORC 4735, our real estate license law. In December 2013, the chairperson of the task force, many of you know her, Terry Hankner, from the Cincinnati area, and I sat down at the Commission meeting and presented to the Commissioners our report and recommendations. Now, as you can see from the slide that's up right now, there were only 9 of those recommendations that went forward and made up the bill that we know as House Bill 532. Through the process that the OAR takes any proposals that are out there for legislation, and they run it through an enlarged legislative committee and onward and upward through their board of directors review and approval, support, non-support. And I boiled that down to the simplest steps. It's a pretty involved process that they put that through. At any rate, there were 2 recommendations from our original 11 that they said they agreed with in part, but they felt that they needed to be modified somewhat. And we'll talk about those in just a few minutes. But I will tell you that those 2 that did not go forward and become part of House Bill 532 had to do specifically with property management. Those were pulled out and have since been put to task with a new task force, one that, of which Kim sits on in my stead, and we can talk about that later. So the commission approved the 9 to go forward. OAR was a huge help to all of us in getting that legislation shepherded through. Representative Ryan Smith from Bidwell, Ohio, a very small rural area, became the sponsor of this bill. And we'll talk a little bit about what took so long. I mean, you can see we started work on this in January 2013. And as Greg and others of you in the room know, we didn't get this bill passed until late in January 2016. And we'll talk about some of the elements in this bill that caused some of that delay. So we've got the bill, we go forward, we have it passed by both chambers of the legislature here in Ohio, and Governor Kasich signs it into law. And so 90 days later, which will be April 6th, it will go into effect. The reason I've got this slide up is because this is the enrollment page from that bill, and it looks like it's pretty small. Doesn't look like there would be that much in it. There is. There's a lot of meat in there, especially for brokers, but for all of us. So let me ask this: how many brokers do we have in the room today? Great, 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 great. How many salespeople? Fabulous. How many, if any, unlicensed folks who may be assistants or otherwise? Excellent. I'm glad you're here. Absolutely glad you're here. So here has been my point as we've gone around the state. You may not be a broker and may think that there's really not much in this bill that you need to be aware of or know, but we would encourage everyone, salespeople alike, to really study this with us today and know what is in here and what changes are taking place. Because while it might not directly affect you, it does tell you what your brokers may and should do, and it also will address some of the things that we talk about frequently with the commission, where salespeople need to be more aware of what is in their license law. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Kim.
I'm Kimberly Wells. I've been with the division since 2013. And what we're going to do today, we're going to go through, the slideshow is going to take you through the statute with each section in order. So as we go, you'll probably hear things a couple times because different sections are going to repeat some of the things that we're saying as we go along. But we're going to start at the beginning of the statute. At the beginning of any statute, you're going to find definitions. So there were some changes to definitions within 473501. Some were revised, some were new. And you can see by the screen which ones are new versus which ones are revised. The new ones have double letters, right? We get to Z, You've got to add definitions. You have to make a way to reference them within the statute. So, we're going to go ahead and start with the first one here. There was a change to the definition of institution of higher education. Now, institution of higher education is the definition that means that is where pre-licensure courses are taken for salespeople and brokers. They're taken at an institution of higher education. So this was revised in an effort to clean up what constitutes an institution of higher education and to account for all of the accrediting bodies that are responsible for accrediting these institutions and approving the courses that are taught for pre-licensure. Now, I know almost all of you had your pre-licensure courses except maybe a couple people that are here unlicensed, but this is important to understand because this was a big contention within the bill as we went forward and things that had to be gone over and negotiated and to get added in. This is simply a cleanup and to clarify. Now, the division does not oversee pre-licensure providers, right? That's why it's important to know who the accrediting bodies are and exactly what constitutes an institution of higher education. Brand new definition within the statute, principal broker. And before I tell you, the definition says licensed as a broker, overseeing, directing the operation of the brokerage. That's the definition. Until April 6th of 2017, there are no principal brokers, there are no brokers of record in the state of Ohio. All brokers are created equal. All brokers are equally responsible. But it wasn't uncommon for me to pick up the phone and call a brokerage and say, I would look first in our licensing database and I would see, well, there's 4 or 5 brokers listed. So I would call and say, may I speak to a broker? It could just be an advertising issue I wanted to discuss, and the person would say, oh, I'm sorry, our broker of record isn't here, or our principal broker isn't here, so there's nobody for you to talk to right now. Well, there's 5 brokers there, so until April 6th of 2017, all brokers are created equal. Now, you will see later that a company has to have one principal broker, but you can have more than one principal broker. Okay, so you can have multiple principal brokers, but you must have at least one affiliated with the brokerage. An associate broker, which is also a new definition, is an individual who is licensed as a real estate broker, but does not act as a principal broker or a management level licensee. So this encompasses the brokers who clearly have had the experience and the education to become a broker, want to maintain the title of broker, but do not want to be responsible for the day-to-day management of the brokerage. It could be somebody that is new to becoming a broker, or maybe it's somebody that has worked really hard and been a broker for many, many, many years managing a brokerage and just says, you know what, I want to take it a little bit easy and let somebody else handle this, and that's where the principal broker would come into play. Credit eligible course. Now this is back to the pre-licensure education. What this means is that when pre-licensure education is taken, the course must be credit eligible. So if the course, when I take the course, is not credit bearing, if I go back to the institution of higher education, I have to be able to obtain credit for that course. And that is the only way that course is going to count towards your pre-licensure education. The course must be credit eligible. And many times we'll see people that will take 120 hours of pre-licensure education and then want to use that education towards their bachelor's degree or their associate's degree, and those courses need to be credit eligible. That's, again, going to the quality of the education that everyone expects the applicants to receive coming into this profession. Distance education. This is a huge change within the statute. Courses now, after April 6th of 2017, whether they're pre-licensure courses, post-licensure courses, or continuing education courses, may be taken online. So what does that mean? Does that mean that on April 6th, 2017, I can tell you who's providing those courses? No, I can't. I can tell you that the statute will allow those courses to be taken online, but it's going to be up to those individual providers, those institutions of higher education, to prepare and provide those courses for applicants and to advertise them as such that people know where they can take them. But the statute will now allow them, those courses, to be taken online. This was, you heard the superintendent speak about Representative Ryan Smith. This was a big issue for Representative Smith. Some of his constituency wasn't able to travel 2 hours to go to an institution of higher education and sit in a classroom and take these courses. It was cost prohibitive, it was too far away. This is something that's going to help individuals, whether they're in the military or otherwise too far away from an actual classroom to get to be able to take these classes online. Okay? And I will turn that back over to the superintendent.
All right, so onward and upward. We are going to talk a little bit about name reservations, how a brokerage company is named. Currently, if you are a broker and you've been through setting up a new brokerage, you're probably pretty familiar with the process of making sure that whatever name or possible names, if you've got multiple names that you may be contemplating for your company, getting those approved by the division, i.e. the superintendent. And also, I'm very uncomfortable talking about myself in the third person, but I will do that multiple times today, so forgive me. But brokerage name reservations become even more important in House Bill 532 for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, the first 2 bullet points that you see on the screen right now already exist, and they make up the litmus test, if you will, that needs to be applied when an individual applies for a brokerage or company name. They exist currently in Ohio Administrative Code. All right. So in Ohio Administrative Code, we affectionately refer to it as rules. All right. Those are the rules that really underpin or amplify what we find in the statute. A lot of times, and you'll hear some later, in fact, where a rule gives you the finer details of how, in fact, a statute is to be implemented or carried out. So the first 2 points here were actually taken out of rule and put directly in the statute. And what those say, and what we currently do right now with name reservations is this. I have to determine that, number 1, the name is not too similar to one that already exists and is in business in the state of Ohio. And the second litmus test is it can't be likely to mislead the public. All right, so those are already applied, and believe me when I say that it's becoming more and more difficult to determine just how far apart names have to be. We've got over 3,600 brokerages and growing every day here in Ohio. So that becomes a bit of a job to make sure that they're not too similar and overstepping. Now, in the past, it hadn't been an issue because we didn't have the internet. We didn't have the internet and all of that advertising where if, Pettit Residential Realty was down in Cincinnati and Pettit Real Estate Services up in Northeast Ohio in the Cleveland area, the 2 probably never overlapped much because there wasn't that global approach to advertising. That has changed everything. All right, the other thing, and I'm going to actually skip to a point that's not on this particular slide. When someone is looking to establish a new brokerage and wanting to reserve a name, one of the most important things that I can tell you is make certain that you get that name approved through the division first before you go to the time and effort and expense of going to the Secretary of State's office and getting it filed there. And we'll talk more about that momentarily. All right, so we brought those 2 points from rule over, and then there's new language. And this new language says that actually a brokerage, if they wish, may have multiple doing business as names, all right, DBAs. So how many of you currently who are brokers have a brokerage with a DBA? A few, yeah, a few. All right, so this opens up a new door, and the new door that is opened is multiple doing business as names for one particular legal entity. All right, and we'll talk about that in detail in just a second. The key is that just as you currently do if you only have one DBA, you must advertise using that DBA. And so if you have multiples, you have to make sure that you're advertising in the correct one. All right, so what is going to underpin, or what are the details for implementation going to be with regard to a brokerage that chooses to have multiple DBAs? Well, first, let me stop and explain two things. The title of this slide, and others that you'll see today, is policy, all right? Policy, for now, because we have to be able to write and have enacted those rules, those details that are going to amplify what now exists in Revised Code 4735. We do not have time, because of the time that is involved in promulgating rules, to get those in place before April 6th. So what we've had to do in the absence of rules right now is I've had to adopt policy in consultation with the commission. All right? And so the first thing is a maximum of 5 DBAs may be requested and held by any particular brokerage. Well, I think once I explain to you what the 4 are that we've thought of that might possibly a brokerage may want, I think you'll start understanding what the application may be. So we thought, well, a brokerage may want a residential DBA. They may want something that applies to a commercial section of their company. They may want one for property management, for instance. And they may want one for a holding company, all right? And as I have fondly been saying as we're on the road, we figured one to grow on, because we don't believe that we particularly have thought of every possible scenario. So here's the thing. Let me give you a quick example of why a brokerage may decide to employ multiple DBAs. What they may want to do is, under that one legal entity umbrella, Pettit Real Estate, Inc., LLC, whatever they determine, they may actually want to have different divisions of a brokerage with the different DBAs so that they can actually advertise that, hey, we're Pettit Commercial Real Estate. Hey, we're Pettit Holding Company. We're Pettit Residential Realty. So that's the example that has been used as we discuss why in the world would we ever permit multiple doing business as names. I will tell you that there are other states that already permit that. All right? So long story short, the process or the policy for now is that you have to do a separate form for each DBA if that is what you would like to have for your brokerage. More importantly, you have to set up a separate trust account for each one. And I think that makes sense probably to all of you in this room. The one thing that you don't want to do is probably have an overlap on trust accounting for earnest money deposits and that type of thing. The other good example of why you'd want separate trust accounts is you also don't want your clients to be confused. If they're writing a deposit check to property management, or let's say a depositing funds for repairs and updates to their property that you're managing, you don't want them writing that to Pettit Commercial Real Estate or Pettit Holding Company. It's a little confusing. So, those of you who have DBAs currently, shows up on your license. When you decide to have multiples, that will show up on an addendum for your license, and that's going to show up just like multiple brokers right now if you have more than one broker in your company. So that's how that works. Here's here's a key, the next to the last point here. If you decide that you want to apply for multiple DBAs for your company, there has to be some commonality. So remember in my example, I used Pettit Real Estate. So the name Pettit probably is what's going to recur through all of those DBAs that I apply for. There's got to be some common thread. Now trust me, this is not a black and white box that we can put things into with regard to multiple DBAs, and with another section that I'll talk about in just a little bit. So if you're thinking about doing this, please feel free to reach out to Kim, to me. We will talk through this with you and work this through. If you are a broker and you're a realtor member, and you end up being a principal broker, then you have direct access to Peg and Lori through the OAR legal hotline as well. And we all have been fielding these questions and will continue to do so, and we're here to help you work through what will and won't be permissible. So don't hesitate to call us on those. And so I talked just a minute ago about making sure that you file with us first before you file your letter of incorporation, your articles of incorporation, file your LLC or corporation officers and everything else. Before you do that at the Secretary of State's office, please, please, please make sure that you get your name reserved and approved at the division. We have, and this is true, we have had a couple of brand new brokers lately in tears on the telephone because they have consulted with an attorney who doesn't necessarily practice specifically real estate law, and by that I mean real estate license law as well. And they have been counseled to go to the Secretary of State, set up their business. Here's the thing. If you're not already aware, the Secretary of State's office has a completely different set of criteria for approving business names in Ohio than to a specific profession or occupation. And so, at the Secretary of State's office, if we had the numeral 1, realty, that's a bad example because we don't license realty and real estate, but the numeral 1, real estate services, Inc., versus ONE, real estate services, Inc., they will approve both of those. If you're the broker at the brokerage with the name numeral 1, you sure do not want somebody else around with the ONE for one, because it's going to be confusing, and I would not actually approve that for that very reason, because it would be confusing to consumers. All right. Also, those pre-licensing courses, as Kim mentioned, now, going forward, must very specifically be credit eligible. If you are already a broker, depending on how long you've been licensed as a broker, you may or may not have had to meet the post-secondary education requirement. But currently, in the revised code, there is a requirement that you have to have 2 years of post-secondary education. The biggest point that I would make here is that to date, a lot of folks have interpreted that as meaning that you have to have an associate's degree at least in order to apply to become a broker. That's not what the statute says, and that part has not changed. So to clarify, it says 2 years of post-secondary education. That could come in the form of, I came this close to obtaining my associate's degree. I've got the requisite 2 years, I just did not complete my degree program. Or you could have 2 years worth of all sorts of other education that is accompanied by a successful completion certificate. Going forward, those 2 years of post-secondary must be credit eligible, and they can be either classroom or online to qualify. So how we're going to have to handle that internally, operationally at the division is this. Once we have House Bill 532 in effect, my staff's going to have to look at transcripts, certificates, whatever it is that is submitted with a broker application, and determine when did those classes take place? When did you actually take those classes, and which law was in effect? Now might get a little tricky if we have somebody who has sort of straddled, so to speak, old law and new law, but by and large, we'll look at transcripts, certificates, make sure that you meet the post-secondary education requirement and that you've got the broker-specific courses like HR and business management that you need, and we'll go from there. Also, big thing for brokers who are currently brokers, your post-licensing stays at 10 hours. Obviously, those of you who already are licensed as brokers have either had that or you were grandfathered in when post-licensing was implemented. All right, so let's talk just a minute more about exactly what credit eligible means. I think Kim covered it very, very well, but I also think that this slide sort of encapsulates the entire philosophy behind the clarification that came out in our discussions as a task force and were eventually codified here. So they have to be taken, that 120 hours have to be taken for credit, or they can be taken not for credit. The key will remain that they have to be taken at an institution of higher education and that they are eligible to be converted to degree eligibility toward your degree program if some day down the road somebody chooses to finish a degree. Those are the keys. All right. Oh, yes. Hold on just a moment, please.
This credit,
Hold on just a moment, please.
Hello?
Yes, thank you.
The credit eligible, that's strictly for licensing and not continuing ed?
That is strictly for pre-licensing. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So here is the new pyramid of licensing as it will stand effective April 6th. And we'll talk about how you get there, all right? We'll talk about that in just a few minutes. But we've got principal brokers now who, as Kim said, are primarily responsible for the operations of the brokerage. Management level licensees, and I don't mind telling you that I had a little bit of difficulty wrapping my head around the fact that we already have a principal broker. We're going to have another layer of broker here in a second, but a broker can also be designated as a management level licensee. I had a little bit of trouble with that one at first, but that is in fact what may happen. And of course, salespeople can be designated as a management level licensee. Associate brokers, on the other hand, are those brokers who are either, I like to explain it this way, you're either on-ramping and you're a fairly new broker and maybe other brokers in the company want to do some mentoring, have you get your toes in the deep end of the pool before they push you in. And so you're not going to necessarily have management responsibilities, but you're still a broker by licensure, all right? So that's associate. Also, it can be an off-ramp for those who are getting toward retirement perhaps, although I still don't know a real estate licensee broker who's actually retired. Several of you are good examples sitting here in this audience today. But if and when somebody wants to not have the responsibility of the day-to-day oversight and be 100% responsible for what is happening in the brokerage, then associate broker is a great designation. Doesn't change the way you have to advertise at all. And you still retain the right to say that you are a broker. You are just not a principal broker or a broker with management level responsibilities, all right? And affiliated salespeople. And again, a salesperson may be a management level licensee. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to Kim.
So 4735.081 is a brand new section of 4735, okay? And what I'm going to tell you is what this section does is take all of the pieces from 4735, which say what a broker is supposed to do, and puts them in one spot, okay? So, first thing that we need to tell you is that come April 6th of 2017, all active brokers will be converted to principal brokers. I say that, and I've only gotten one reaction every time I said that, because nobody else has reacted. So what's going to happen, you're going to be able to designate who your principal brokers are, but for that beginning date, everybody who's an active broker is going to be a principal broker. And the reason for that is, as I've told you before, right now, the way brokers are situated, all brokers in Ohio are created equal. They're equally responsible. This gives the division the opportunity to get your designations in and allow us to update our database and allow us to get the database set up so that we can designate who's the principal broker, who's the associate broker. Now, April 1st, between April 1st and June 30th, on April 1st we send out the brokerage assessment forms. We send those out to brokerages from sizes have 11 salespeople up to 20 or more, or you have one branch office. We do that because that's how you renew your brokerage license or your branch licenses, okay? Now in 2015, we sent a brokerage assessment to every brokerage, regardless of the size, and we did that because we needed to update trust account information. As you're all aware, if you have a brokerage, you have to have a trust account. If you're operating a property management business, you also have to have a separate property management account. Those accounts had not been updated with the division since someone first set up their company with the division however long ago. So we sent those out in 2015. We're repeating that process this year. So April 1st, every brokerage, regardless of how many people are in it, will receive a brokerage assessment. Now, doesn't mean you're going to have to pay money. What it means is you're going to have to fill out a form and designate who your principal brokers are, who your associate brokers are, who your management level licensees are. Okay? Each brokerage is going to have a principal broker, at least one. And obviously, if you are a sole proprietor with one broker, then that broker is going to be the principal broker. Now you may want to know, how are you going to notify the division of this change? We've created a form, and that's what's next. So looking at the bottom, it says changing the license level designation. Complete sections 1, 3, and 6, and the principal broker must certify. On the second page, you will see where we've circled where the principal broker is choosing for that particular licensee whether that person's going to be a principal broker, management level salesperson, management level broker, associate broker, or a salesperson. At the bottom, that's where the principal broker is going to sign, and there's a certification. We're taking the opportunity at every one of these classes that we have put on to say, certification on any form that comes to the division is incredibly important. We take that very, very seriously. A broker is certifying what is on that form is accurate, that they've reviewed the form, and maybe we have situations where we'll receive forms within the division where a broker, let's say it's a transfer reactivation application, let's say it's a brand new application for a salesperson to sit for the exam. The broker has signed it days before the salesperson. So what does that mean in the division? That means that broker signed off on it and has no idea what the salesperson added to it afterwards and then dated it later. Those forms come back. They immediately get stopped at the front desk or through the mail. They get flagged and they go back to the broker, saying this certification is important. And it's going to be even more important now that there's a principal broker or more than one principal broker, and they are going to be individually responsible for the activities of that brokerage. Okay. 4735, I told you, .081, takes all of those duties that are scattered throughout Chapter 4735, the Administrative Code, and the canons of ethics, and puts them in one spot. And there are 14 duties, and what the section says is that a principal broker shall do all of the following. Okay? Principal broker shall oversee and direct the operations of the brokerage. I think that's pretty obvious. That's in the definition, and that's what the principal broker or principal brokers are going to be responsible for doing. Principal brokers are going to be responsible for complying with the office requirements. Brokers are already responsible, but you would be surprised how many people I talk to that say, I had no idea that I had to have a physical place of business in the state of Ohio. Can't I just have a virtual office or a P.O. box? No, you must maintain a physical place of business in the state of Ohio, and you must erect and maintain a sign. Does that mean that if you're acting or conducting business outside of your home that you couldn't put a business card on your door? No, that's not what it means. It means you must have a sign. And many people have said in vision, I had no idea. So again, bringing these sections together. Complying with the fair housing requirements, of course, is an obligation of the principal broker. And as you can see there in 4735-16B, 4735.03, and then in the administrative code. How many of you saw Peg Rittenauer's webinar that she put on regarding House Bill 532? Any of you? Okay. Well, after the webinar, we got many, many phone calls saying, what's new with the fair housing? There's some new language? Is there a new poster? We promised Peg that we would let everyone know, no, there's nothing new. And she was just reminding everyone of the fair housing requirements. But you wouldn't believe how many phone calls we got because people thought there was a new poster or something new that needed to be done. A principal broker must properly and timely renew brokerage or branch licenses. That's what we're talking about with the brokerage assessment. That is the principal broker's responsibility. It is the broker's responsibility now. So what happens if the brokerage assessment isn't received by June 30th? The entire brokerage is suspended. All of the salespeople, regardless of the number of them, are suspended. That does happen. We'll have situations where, oops, we didn't know about it, we didn't realize, and then the entire brokerage is suspended. A principal broker is responsible. Oh, yes, sir. Hold on one second.
If you're just a single broker, you have to do anything. If you just set it automatically versus the principal to be able to do anything.
Hang on one second. Yeah, the question was, if you are a sole broker, do you have to do anything when you do the brokerage assessment? Yes, you need to send that back in to us, okay? All right, thank you. A principal broker must maintain the licenses of the brokers and the affiliated licensees.
Question here.
Yes.
If I have a broker license,
Can you hang on one second till we get you a mic so everybody can hear your question? Thank you.
and so we catch it on the video too.
If I have a broker license on deposit, what do I need to do?
You wouldn't be, if you have a broker's license on deposit, you don't need to do anything because you're not affiliated with a brokerage, right? Your license is inactive.
My sales license is with the broker.
Well, then the broker would be receiving the brokerage assessment and would be determining who would be the principal broker or the associate brokers and responsible for filling that out.
So I would become an associate.
And if that's what your broker determines that you are going to become, it's up to
We
the
can't
broker.
hear her questions.
Her question was, what does she need to do? She is an active salesperson. She has her broker's license on deposit. So her question was, what does she need to do? And what I'm saying is she doesn't need to do anything. The broker, the principal broker will be filling out the form and sending it back. If the principal broker determines that she is a salesperson, will be an associate broker, that's the box that that principal broker will check and send back in. That will be a decision made by the active broker for the company.
So do I understand that you're automatically an associate broker if you have it on deposit? If you have your broker's license on deposit and you're a salesman, you just referred to if you're a salesman and he checks the box as an associate broker.
No. If you are, okay. What I am saying is, what I was trying to say was, if you are a salesperson, you are a salesperson. If you have a brokerage license that's inactive, you are a salesperson. If there's a determination made by the broker, the active broker for the company, that you are going to activate your broker's license, then it wants to make you a principal broker or designate you as an associate broker, that is a decision that will be made by the principal broker for that company.
And will we know that?
Yeah.
So here's the thing. This ought to be done in consultation with the broker. If you've got multiple brokers, then you need to be in contact with them and say, okay, let me know who the principal broker is going to be, and then we need to have a conversation about whether I leave my broker's license on deposit or whether I activate it and become an associate broker. Do you want me to be a broker at management level licensee? It's really what you want in consultation with your principal broker. That conversation has to be had if you are currently a broker on deposit. Does that clarify? Awesome.
All right. A principal broker must also properly return terminated licensees' licenses. Now, in the past couple weeks, I've had a couple phone calls where I've talked to a broker and they said, well, I returned this individual's license because they couldn't pay their board dues. Okay, sure, no problem. Could you provide a copy of the certified letter that you sent to the salesperson advising them that their license is inactive and how they reactivate it as is required by the rule? Oh, well, no, I couldn't do that. I sent a text. Okay, so again, putting all of these sections in one place so that everybody realizes the responsibility of the broker and now the principal broker and the proper return of these licenses is another example. Principal broker complying with the trust account requirements as they're found in 4735-18A, 26 and 27. 26 refers to the general brokerage trust account. 27 is referring to the property management trust account if one is required. And then 4735-1824 is the record-keeping requirement, maintaining records, transactional documents for 3 years. Now, I've been asked multiple times, well, I was told I have to keep my records for 5 years or 7 years. There may be different reasons to keep records for longer periods of time, but for purposes of licensing law, for purposes of 4735, the statute requires that the records are maintained for a period of 3 years. Principal brokers are going to be responsible, just like brokers are now, for developing and maintaining written company policies as found in 4735-54 and 4735-56, Broker's Policy on Agency. Paying affiliated licensees as required. 4735-18A31 says that an affiliated salesperson must be paid in a reasonable time or receive an accounting as to why they're not being paid or why there's deductions being made. That's a common complaint that we receive at the division, as I'm sure you can imagine. Generally overseeing licensees to ensure they provide services within the area of competency or are working with other affiliated licensee who is competent. That's found in the canons currently. Now it's going to be found in 4735.081. Now, we've talked about that a lot as we've been on the road as well, and what does that mean? Well, if you have a salesperson that has only done residential work and then says, well, I want to do commercial work today, I want to take a commercial deal. Well, we need to make certain, and it is the principal broker's responsibility to make certain that that person is competent and comfortable with handling that transaction or that they're affiliated and working with someone else who has handled such transactions. And I've used the example of myself. Most people say, well, you have your law degree, right? So I should be able to text you in the middle of the night, that never happens, and ask you to come to my house tomorrow and draft my will. Or, gee, could you take a look at this intellectual property agreement that I want to enter into? No. Everybody has an area of expertise. Just because somebody has a license doesn't necessarily mean they're comfortable with doing everything that license would allow them to do. The other thing that I've said along the way, people have said, well, how do I know if somebody's competent and what do I do as a broker? And what I've said is, in my opinion, it's a matter of conveying to affiliated licensees that it is okay to say, I'm not sure how to do that, this is my first time, where do I get some assistance? And making sure that there's an open line of communication between the affiliated licensee and the broker, and everyone's comfortable with saying, I don't know that I'm ready to do that particular transaction right now. Maybe you could help me or put me with someone who has some experience that can. Okay. Principal broker is also responsible for establishing policies and procedures. 4735-18A34. Procedures that would not permit or to compensate unlicensed activity. Also in 4735-20, the prohibition on compensating an unlicensed individual. 4735.16 is where our advertising rules are found, and of course there's some in the administrative code as well. Now, I would say that in my experience with the division for the past 4 years, I would say the biggest complaint we see is on advertising. We can set up our own section for somebody just to handle advertising calls and complaints, because you all do a very, very good job of policing each other and saying, hey, did you see so-and-so's, I just got one today. Where do I send this person's Facebook post so that you can take a look at it and tell me if it's compliant with license law? I know it's not, and I want you guys to take a look at it. So this is just a reminder that a broker is responsible, and a principal broker now, is responsible for the advertising for the brokerage. Again, always has been, but putting this in one spot. Now, one example that I've had in the past few weeks is where somebody sent an email to the division and was asking some questions, and they were not a licensee yet. They were applying, and in the bottom of their email, it had the brokerage logo and a phone number and the brokerage name. Okay. So I'm looking at that and thinking, well, aren't you an applicant? So I called the broker, and I said, have you seen this email? Does this person work for you as an unlicensed assistant? Oh, he doesn't work for me. He works for another salesperson. Well, you're responsible for the advertising. This advertising that's going out under your brokerage name is misleading, and very well could be misleading to a consumer that would get a hold of that email and think that this person is a licensed salesperson or broker with your company. And if you don't take a look at that advertising, someone could very well be confused, and it very well could lead to a citation or some sort of discipline. He needs to be notated if he's working as an unlicensed assistant as such. Now, principal brokers may assign management level duties to other licensees, right? But before assigning those duties, you have to make the designation that this person is going to be a management level salesperson or broker. And that goes back to that designation form that I showed you earlier, and how to make that designation and say, well, this person's going to be a management level person and I'm going to assign some of my duties. Okay? A broker may be a principal broker for more than one brokerage. I'm going to say that again. A principal broker may be a principal broker for more than one brokerage, meaning I can't be a principal broker at company A and an associate broker at company B. If I am going to attempt to be a principal broker at more than one company, I have to be a principal broker at both. And being a principal broker at more than one company is going to require the approval of the superintendent before that happens. Now, a couple times within the statute, you're going to see a reference to the relationship between a broker and their affiliated licensees, and whether or not the affiliated licensee is a salesperson, is an employee or an independent contractor. Okay? So what we're saying is that in this section, nothing in 4735.0A1 is to be construed as saying that that relationship between the broker and the salesperson must be construed as creating an employee-employer relationship or an independent contractor relationship. That is entirely a business decision of the brokerage. Okay? Now, the reason it's here, in my opinion, again, is because one of the factors that you look at when determining whether or not someone is an independent contractor or an employee is control. And when we have an entire new section of the code that says the principal broker shall do all of these things and the principal broker is responsible for this company, that seems like a lot of control.
All right, so I didn't even see anybody flinch when Kim said that thing about a principal broker for multiple companies. I didn't even see anybody flinch. Of course, I couldn't see some of you over here, so maybe you did flinch. But we're going to talk about that. And so again, this slide and a couple to come are titled policy. So this is specifically set out to help everybody understand how initially, at least until rules are in place, we're going to deal with companies where a principal broker requests to be a principal broker for multiple brokerages. Kim already told you, each and every brokerage company has to have at least one principal. May you have multiples? Absolutely. If your brokerage company already has 5 principal brokers and operationally, organizationally, you determine that all 5 are still going to be principal, then absolutely. That's great. You will each 5 continue to be 100% responsible for what's going on. The next thing is 15 days notice within the time. So let's say that you do start out during the time that brokerage assessments are sent out, and you determine that only one broker in the company is going to function as a principal broker. And 6 months down the road, you change your minds. You've got 15 days from the time that you designate the other 4 to be principal brokers to get notice into the superintendent that that's what's happened, that they've changed their designation. That form that Kim showed you earlier, that is, we're road weary. What can I say? It's like, wait, we did go over that, right? So the form that she showed you for changes earlier, that's the form that you would use then to designate those other 4 individuals as principal brokers at that point in time. 15 days, what else, and we'll talk about a reminder here for a moment. What else has to be done within 15 days when you change it? Anybody? Anybody know? Everybody's shy. Your address. If you're going to change your address, home or business, the brokerage address, but especially your home address, because that's where you get notices sent. So if you say that you didn't get a notice from us, it might be because you've moved and you didn't let us know, all right? So that's the other 15 days. As Kim said, a principal broker may only be a principal in multiple companies. We've had a couple of questions come to us about, well, what if I decide to be a principal broker at one company and they want me to be an associate broker over at another company? No, that is not what House Bill 532 permits, and that will not work. So a lot of the details with regard to this area are yet to be determined, and we're getting a lot of really great questions while we're on the road that are going to help solidify some of the implementation policy that goes along with this. Before I go over this slide, I want to just take, oh, do we have a question? Yes, I'm sorry. Hold on just a minute, please. Thank you.
Is one of the main reasons for that, for multiple being a broker, multiple brokerage, so you can have a holding company? Is that kind of the principle behind this?
That's a great segue to my example. Absolutely. So let me very quickly, sir, give the example. When we talked earlier about multiple doing business as, DBAs, under the same legal umbrella, same brokerage umbrella, in this example, you may determine that for various reasons, you want to make sure that there is an absolute Chinese wall, a firewall, if you will, between 2 or more companies. And the great example is that let's say that I have Pettit Residential Realty and all of my affiliated licensees are going to be independent, or they are independent contractors, all right? That is one business model that I'm running. So then I've got a second company that is Pettit Properties LLC, and there I employ people. They are my regular employees, all right? And I do that for a number of reasons. First and foremost, the 2 separate entities is, as most of you would assume, for liability separation reasons. And then also the difference in the operating structure, the structure that I have set up for how I am or am not employing people is another great example. Good question. Yes, sir. Okay, all right, great. Excellent, yes. Thanks for that question, because that's the exact example that we have been offering that helps sort of illustrate, because it's not uncommon for when we talk about first multiple DBAs and then principal broker for multiple brokerages, that everybody sort of tilts their head like, why would we use that? Well, those are two great examples of why you would make that differentiation. So along with that, principal broker serving for more than one brokerage, it is absolutely going to be essential, critical, that proper disclosures be made. Because even if you use the example of one being property management, or let's say commercial and the other residential, you can't probably immediately come up with an example of how the two would ever, overlap, or that you'd have a situation where you've got transactions that touch both at the same time. But in other situations, it can happen. And so, especially maybe the holding company relationship, where you've got somebody referring somebody to the residential brokerage. So that is where, number one, if you're going to go with this format, this structure operationally, then you need to make certain that all of your affiliated licensees and others understand that there is that relationship. And the best way to do that is first and foremost through face-to-face conversation, but also through your brokerage company policy. All right? And so if you memorialize how you're doing things, and that Ann Pettit is the principal broker for Company A, and she also serves as principal broker for Company B, if you memorialize that in your company policy, and you make sure that when new people come in, they're given a copy and somebody goes over it with them, you get their acknowledgement that they've gotten it, and hopefully they've read it, then you've done your part as a broker. Periodically, getting everybody in your company to acknowledge that, yes, we've looked through it again, here are the new things or the changed items that have gone in there, and hopefully everybody's read it. But you as a broker have yourself covered, that you've made it available, you've got acknowledgement that you've shared it, and that you anticipate that the person acknowledging receipt has actually looked at it. It's going to have to be information that's disclosed on agency disclosures. All right? Now, we say, to those of you who are Realtor members, you have heard Peg and Lori Garland numerous times say, you can't change anything, you can't add anything to the agency disclosure, that's a state form. Okay, just like the property disclosure form. And that's true, but this is the one time that until we get a new agency disclosure form out there and available for all of you to use, if you're a principal broker, or you're with a principal broker who is principal in more than one brokerage, and that's already been applied for and approved, so you're up and running under that structure, then you need to make sure that you're disclosing that on agency disclosures, regardless of whether or not you're running into what you would consider a dual agency situation. It still has to be disclosed, all right? If you want to do an addendum, or if you want to add it to the existing form somewhere, for now, we're okay with that. We are not going to have a problem with that. The bullet point about affiliated relationships is there not in a RESPA context, but more along the lines of, I own a residential real estate company, or any company, and I also have a home inspection company. That type of business affiliation context needs to be applied here. And so that needs to be disclosed as appropriate to any parties it could affect. And I've already talked about including it in your brokerage company policy. All right, so real quickly before the break, we're going to go over a few more slides here. And again, some of this is going to be repetition because now we're looking at the criteria to apply for sitting to be a salesperson, and a lot of this duplicates what's already in the brokerage requirements in 07, and this is 4735.09. So again, as of April 6th, distance education can be used for pre-licensing. I will tell you, as a former educator and talking through this, and Mr. Rabchek knows this too, as we discussed what credit-eligible pre-licensing courses look like, they're not CE, folks. They're not CE. They are going to require interaction. You're still going to be separated from the instructor or faculty member by time and space, probably, but you're going to have, if any of you have taken online college-level courses, they typically can be considered a little more difficult than attending in a classroom. So from our perspective, it's going to be very interesting to see how this all plays out once these courses are available for pre-licensing, as to whether or not somebody's able to complete or wants to complete all 4 online, whether they want to take some in class and some online, or how this all shakes out. So we'll be keeping an eye open for that. All right, same thing goes as far as successful completion. We'll make that determination dependent upon when the individual actually took the classes, all right, and what law was in effect at that time. But here's the big change, and this is a change that we heard from the request for a change that we heard from many, many brokers, almost every educator, and a lot of salespeople as well, believe it or not. So they'll be able to take the post-licensing online. It's increased twofold. It will move from 10 hours to 20 hours. All right? Here's the difference. That 10 hours right now is basically set out in curriculum by the commission, promulgated by the commission. Going forward, the 20 hours, in the statute it says it doesn't need to be limited to these particular topical areas, but it absolutely needs to include things that to many, many of us in the profession believe is kind of lacking right now in post-licensure, like touching on and talking about and getting into a little bit commercial, industrial, short sales and foreclosures, REOs, land contracts, property management is a big one. Federal and state programs, like our own OFA programs for first-time home buyers. Many, many of our brand new licensees don't even know that exists for their potential clients. Talking about the economic conditions at that point in time and how those affect how you do what you do on a daily basis. And also fiduciary responsibilities. What's vested in the salesperson as an agent of the broker, who is an agent of that client. So all of that and how it intertwines and how it works together. All right. So here's the, oh, I'm sorry, we've got a question in the back.
Is the 20 hours from date of license or when they've submitted their application to the division?
If you would do me a favor, and well, that is actually a Q&A that we have on a slide here. It's a very good segue to that. So we'll cover that in just a minute, but that's a great question and one which we will answer. Salesperson licensing also for pre-licensure. So I say on this slide, here's where it gets a little interesting. We've talked about the fact that they have to be credit eligible courses. So for non-credit courses, often offered through a proprietary school, through a community college, for instance, they don't actually have the 120 hours built into a degree program, such as a real estate program or a business program. But they're freestanding courses, and they're still college level courses, but they're not for credit. They're offered not for credit. So if they're going to do that, and it's not going to be part of an accredited program, they must, meaning the institution offering them, must get approval from their appropriate accrediting entity. And each college and university and school has an entity that gives their blessing to their courses and their programs. They have to get approval from that accrediting entity prior to offering the 120 hours. All right? Beyond that, that accrediting entity, if they have any questions about what is appropriate to be content curriculum in that 120 hours, they may ask the superintendent to review those with them and determine whether or not they are sufficient. All right? I am hoping that that does not happen, but we shall see. We shall see.
I told you there were two sections, two places in House Bill 532 that would discuss the relationship between a broker and a salesperson. So this is the second place, okay? It has its own separate section, 4735.091, sits alone. Nothing. So what it says is that a real estate broker or real estate salesperson for a foreign real estate dealer and foreign real estate salesperson may be associated with a brokerage as an independent contractor or an employee. Okay, that's all it says. 4735.10 is the section of the Ohio Revised Code that gives the Commission the ability to create rules. So, 4735.10 says the Commission may adopt reasonable rules in these areas. So since we have some new areas, things had to be added to that particular section in order to allow the Commission to adopt some more rules. And we talked about some of those, and some of those where we currently have policies in place, which the superintendent has gone over some of those. One, there's additional authority for the Commission to adopt rules with respect to parameters for multiple DBAs doing business as, parameters for a principal broker to serve as a principal broker for multiple brokerages. There's going to be the ability for the Commission to adopt rules to allow core law for continuing education for attending a commission meeting. We're going to let the superintendent, she's got a whole separate slide on that and she'll talk through that. But what we have found is that many people that will attend a commission meeting, and some people just come and stay for the whole meeting and enjoy it and say, I learned so much today. I got to see the process from the beginning to the end, whether it was discipline or whether it was an application or whether or not it was someone that was on the agenda because they had applied to teach post-licensing courses and they were there to be approved for that. And so people will say, this was a great experience. I got to see who the commissioners were, what they did, and to get a better understanding for what happens. And that's where this came from. And then the rules will now be allowed, the commission will be allowed to adopt rules for standards for post-licensing courses. And what I anticipate is that these standards, this rule, will be very, very similar to the rule for continuing ed that you find in the rules currently. In fact, I think it's going to mirror that. Okay? Okay. All right.
Mr. Woodruff, could we run the mic down to President Giller, please? I wanted to make sure before we break that President Giller is able to give you his perspective on what we've covered in this first half, especially since I looked right over him and didn't give him his usual opportunity to talk about House Bill 532 and what we went through to get here.
Okay, first of all, nice to see all of you. And yes, I did step out for longer than the appropriate amount of time, so I will not be accepting this as continuing education. This will be my second half of this I've made, so eventually I'll get like 4 or 5 in a row and I'll accumulate some CE. I think the one thing that's important from the commission standpoint is why we went through the 3-year process to put this through is because what we see from the brokers especially is somewhat of a lack of connectivity between the brokers and their individual sales or licensees. Where the broker thinks, well, that's just the licensee, he does what he's supposed to do, and we have no responsibility. Where the salesperson, on the other hand, says, that's just my broker, and I do what I want to do. If I hear one more time, that's just the way we've done it for the last 40 years in front of me, you know, I mean, the people that I hear that from generally lose their license right after they say it. Because just because you've done something for 40 years has nothing to do with the law and the rules that we're supposed to follow. This was important to not only myself, but David Paul, Terry, and Gary Folick, who were on the commission when we started this process. We thought it was beneficial to go through this exercise, to update our, the broker structure. Another thing that I noticed is, as Kim or Ann had mentioned, people would say they're brokers and they didn't understand that they had that responsibility, whether they were the principal broker, they were just a broker. It is what it is, you were what you were. But people want to use that as a marketing tool. Yes, I'm a broker, so the associate broker was important for clarity, and then who was responsible for what. So, and I think the reason we're doing these free CE around this is because we wanted to use the Education Research Fund in order to give back for the individuals who have given into it. So provide this free CE in order to have this go around the state and bring this to each of you. So it was important to us, and over the last 7 years that I've been on the board, if you went to 5 meetings, you would be shocked at what some people in industry believe is professionalism. Shocked. I'm sure none of you in here I'll ever see you again because you're trying to educate yourself, but you'd be amazed at what comes in front of us and what people think should be standard practice in our industry, which is absolutely incorrect from my position. So again, just thanks for coming. I'll answer any questions that you may have as we go through. I fought hard for this to get this passed and pushed over the finish line, because I think it's important for our industry to be seen as professionals. We are professionals. It's a professional industry, and we should be seen that way. We should treat ourselves that way, and we should be seen from the public that way. So that's the reason that we push so hard for this. So that's kind of where we stand. If any questions now or later, just let me know.
How many of you were licensed prior to the time that there were post-licensing requirements? A whole bunch of you, so that makes a lot of sense that there were some questions regarding that. So just to clarify, what we covered with regard to the new 20 hours for salespeople, that is now the chunk of education that has to happen in that first year after licensure. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But some of you didn't even have to worry about that, so you're probably scratching your heads if you haven't had someone else close to you who has been required to fulfill that requirement. It didn't mean anything to you. So I appreciate that question. The other thing that I want to say to you, not only as the superintendent, but as a licensee as well, is, look, brokers, we know that you cannot handhold and be over the shoulder of your affiliated sales folks every minute of every day. That is not what the broker responsibilities are about. As President Giller said, they are about requiring the general oversight and making sure that our brokers know that much of what is in those 14 points are things that you need to educate your affiliated licensees on. They need to know what your responsibilities are and how you are going to fulfill those responsibilities, be it through your brokerage company policy, your own internal training programs, any of that's fine. Really, what he didn't say was this. If and when a salesperson has a complaint filed against them, and if it ends up that they come before the commission, the commissioners, to a last one, I think is fair to say, are almost always going to ask, do you know what your brokerage company policy is on this issue? Are you aware of it? Actually, in one instance, Ms. Taylor had to ask a salesperson licensee, do you even know what the company policy is? It in a manual? Is it online? How do you get? And they said, I have no idea what you're talking about. That was a little scary for the commissioners, and that's what they're talking about. We understand that you are not sending over your salespeople every day. In particular, with regard to advertising, when we talk about citations in advertising, it's like, try to be aware. Tell your salespeople, hey, before you put anything on Facebook, and we'll talk about that more later, here's what you've got to do. And by the way, you have to have permission to do this. And by the way, somebody in our office is going to review, if we don't do your cards and other things, your electronic signature, if we don't format that for you, then somebody in this office is going to review it for you before you can use it, because we want to keep you out of trouble as one of our licensees. So that's really what we're talking about. All right, onward and upward. Let's get back to some education questions and issues, because all of you who are brokers currently may be management level licensees, either currently or in the future after April 6th, are probably going to be and have been asking questions about, what is this new broker responsibility course I'm hearing about? Well, here it is. It is a new core requirement in the law. And here are the folks who have to take it. And then we'll talk about when. All right? So if you're a broker, if you're going to be the principal broker, if you're going to be a management level licensee broker, inactive or active, and I'll explain why in a second, you have to take this new broker responsibility course. If you're a broker on deposit, all right, you have to take this course. Management level licensee, I talked about a broker, but a salesperson who is designated as a management level licensee must take this course. All right? The good news is this bottom bullet, which is that does not in any way change the total number of hours that we have to take as real estate licensees. It is still a grand total of 30 hours every 3 years. All right? That will not change. Now, here's where I'm really glad that I'm behind this big, strong wooden podium, and that hopefully those of you who are out there who might be affected by this next slide are far enough away that you can't throw things at me, or at least not accurately throw, all right, at me. Because this core requirement also affects our licensees who are brokers 70 years of age and older. All right, let's talk about the way the law stands right now. Right now, if I'm a broker and I'm 72 years old and I'm active, I have to take the 3 core classes. All right, I don't have to take any more. I only have those 9 hours.
Thank you, Jesus.
Now, you will have 12 hours. So that is an increase. And I'm so sorry, Representative, because you're laughing. All right, so now you're going to have that broker responsibility course. All right? If you are an inactive, so your broker's license is on deposit, all right, you still have to have just this one course. The way the law was written, and we believe in conversation with OAR at this point that this was an unintended consequence, and Kim and I both said, are we sure we want to do this? Are we sure we want to do this? Well, we did this, and so now inactive or on deposit brokers currently do not have to do any continuing education. Going forward, until and unless we change it, you will have to have one course totaling 3 hours. You may do this, no matter who you are, you may do it online once it's available. As Kim mentioned earlier about the online courses, providers are in the midst of developing these and getting them ready to put out out there for all of you to access. But once they are, you can take it in class, you can take it online. That is entirely up to you. It may be taken either way. All right? And this is the only increase in total number of hours is for our brokers on deposit. All right? Inactive or active. Yes, sir?
You know what the label of that course will be, like core law, core ethics, civil rights?
It should be something along the lines of core broker responsibility. Plural, as we know now, 14 of them, broker responsibilities. Something along those lines. And if they title it differently, they will have to put on there a label that this meets your requirement for the new core broker course. All right? And remember, all management level licensees have to take this as well. All right? So here's when. Here's when and how this affects you. Now, this is really a big grace period. All right? The big grace period is that if you are currently a broker and you're going to be required to take this, you will be required to take it in your CE cycle, your 3-year cycle that begins after April 6th. All right? So let's say that right now your next renewal date is May 15th of 2018. Between now and 2018, you are not required to take this. You'll be required to take it in your cycle that starts May 16, 2018. All right? Management level licensees are going to be required to take it in their renewal cycle, the next one that starts right after they're designated as a management level licensee. So let's say that your designation happens in the brokerage assessment that Kim talked about earlier. So somewhere before June 30th, we get your brokerage's paperwork in that says that Ann Pettit is now a management level licensee. All right? I am not due to renew until, now I've forgotten. Actually, I'm not due to renew now until March 5th of 2020. So that means that I don't have to take it. I'm not required to take it until my cycle that starts March 6th, 2020. All right? Wow, that's a long time to have all of those responsibilities delegated to me and not have to take this course. Thus, the last comment down here, and I know that Ms. Taylor and President Giller, Commissioner Taylor and President Giller are sitting over here. I put down exactly what our conversation was. The Commission highly recommends that if you are a broker or a management level licensee, that you take this course as part of your current cycle if you can. All right? You don't have any additional hours to get to your 30. It can be an elective this time around. All right? Maybe you already have 30 some hours and you're ready to renew. That's fine. Get it in your next cycle. But if you're not going to be renewing until 2018, 19, 20, please consider taking this course ahead of time because I can just about guarantee you I've spent enough years, especially with that gentleman who is the president of the commission, that if you get in trouble between now and then for something that's a broker responsibility and you come before the commission, that's going to be his first question. Have you taken advantage of the new core course yet? All right, enough on that. Okay, but here's a fun one, and I love this because it came to the commission one month last year and said, what do you five think about offering continuing education credit if somebody comes and sits through a commission meeting? All right? And they said, we love that idea. That's a great idea. How would this work? How do you envision this working, Ann? And I said, well, first and foremost, so the first bullet point, you're allowed to chuckle out loud because everybody else has, all right? You're not allowed to be a party to a case on the agenda, all right? At least not the respondent, all right? You may be a complainant as a licensee or non-licensed person, but you cannot be a respondent who is there and potentially going to be disciplined by the commission. And as President Giller said earlier, we know that everybody sitting in these sessions, we are preaching to the choir. So I'm going to assume that every single one of you would be able to come and sit through this. All right, so you have to attend the full meeting. And while Kim nor I would ever say that, well, you might want to look at this month versus this month because May is going to probably be about a 6-hour meeting, and April might only be a 3 or 4 hour meeting. We're not going to clue you in that way, but you can draw those conclusions yourself by getting on our email list to get the agendas to the commission meetings. And that way you can look at it when it's sent to you, and you can say, that looks like a pretty short agenda. Maybe this is one that I could fit into my busy day, and you would like to come and spend time with us. Like any other core course, you can only use it as core law once per cycle, but certainly you can use it as an elective if you need more credit hours, all right? So I said that you can get on the email list, and we will share with you towards the end our general email account address if you don't already have it. So here, let me show you, and I know that some of this is a little bit difficult to see for me. Whoops. But let me point out to you, back on. There we go. That at our website, or if you go to Commerce's website, then the Real Estate and Professional Licensing tab, Enforcement tab on the left here, and down in the very right, you can click on the Real Estate Commission schedule for 2017. The commission sets their schedule an entire year in advance. So you'll be able to see the entire year's schedule there and determine whether or not you might want to come to one of the meetings. All right, so that is where you can link up with us there. And of course, if you're not familiar with our website, there's a lot of other good stuff there, including, as I mentioned, that's where you're going to be able to find this video eventually and our FAQs when we're finished with all of our sessions. All right. Moving along, 4735.18 is where all of the possible license law violations are listed out. Those are what shows up if and when a licensee is found to have violated a license law. That is where the charge notice that goes out to that individual shows 4735 probably and .18 and what section they are accused of or allegedly have violated. All right. So we have a brand new one. Right now there are 37 other ones there. All right. This is the brand new one that is there. And I'll explain to you a little bit about how this came about. Some of you may have a very good idea once we go over this. Having acted as a broker without the authority to act as a broker, or having impeded the ability of a principal broker to perform any of the duties that we went over earlier, any of those 14, all right, as they are in .081, or impeded the ability of a management level licensee to perform that licensee's duties as they have been assigned or delegated, all right? So here's why this came into being. And the folks at OAR get these calls all the time. We've gotten a few, and we've found out that this type of thing has been happening across Ohio an awful lot. And that is that, let's review for a moment, that you don't necessarily have to be a licensee in order to own and open a real estate company. All right? Don't have to be. Or you can be a salesperson, not ultimately responsible for what's happening at that company, and you can own and operate your own brokerage. All right, so what has been happening in some instances is we will call, or the broker who is in that company will just reach out to us or to Peg and Lori at OAR and say, I'm asking to see the trust account financials. I'm asking to see the ledger for our property management operation. And the owner or owners aren't giving it to me. Or I'm telling them that this is how we have to advertise, and they're saying, oh, no, 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 no. This is how we're going to advertise, and I know that if we do it that way, it is absolutely a license law violation. And they feel like their hands are tied because they're being told, sorry, you don't own this place, you're just the broker. And that is not going to fly anymore. So in some cases, this could be a charge against an unlicensed individual or individuals. All right? It also should assist the division and the commission in addressing the situation that we've had over the last few years with what we call, and I know some of you refer to it as well, as a rent-a-broker situation. All right? They've got a broker in, Florida, 9 out of 12 months, has no idea what's going on, and somebody else is left in charge who is not a broker in most cases, and so we're dealing with that. All right, moving along to 4735.23. So there is one other interesting section that was included with regard to what happens with pre-licensing education. And this particular section states that in the reverse of an education provider and their accrediting entity asking the superintendent to review courses and make a determination as to their sufficiency, this is when we're notified that perhaps there is an issue with courses that are being offered for pre-licensure, and I, as the superintendent, reach out to the Ohio Department of Higher Education and ask them to take a look at it. Let me stop for just a second, and many of us in this room do not know this agency as the Ohio Department of Higher Education. We know it as the Board of Regents. All right, new name for them. Still the chancellor at the head of that agency, but that is that agency's new title. So at any rate, then the Division of Real Estate, my folks, and the chancellor's folks can put their heads together. The chancellor or I may request additional documentation or information from that institution. We could also talk to students who have taken the courses at that particular institution, and we can review for content their curriculum and come to a determination as to whether or not it is sufficient to meet the requirements in 4735. Now, this could already happen. A referral from the superintendent could go to the Department of Higher Education. What this changes for the division, for me specifically, is that now when I ask for that review or their input into whether or not these meet the definition of credit eligible, for instance, it's saying that they're going to assist us in that, and that together we're going to get to the bottom of it. Let me give you an example. We have gotten calls over the years about pre-licensing courses being held in someone's basement. We've gotten calls about pre-licensing courses being held where actually no students are there. And true, true story. And certificates are issued. And up until now, the superintendent, again, could make that referral to the Department of Higher Education, but there really wasn't any requirement for that agency to take that on, even though they wanted to. They just didn't have to. All right, let's move on. This is an interesting one, and I know that Kim's been reading right out of the statute. So, oops. While she's dealing with something else, I'm going to, because it seems to be, as we went over this a couple of times already, it certainly seems to be clearer to everyone if we talk about it directly quoting from the statute and then taking the conversation from there. So this is about the release of earnest money. There are still 4 conditions that are in the statute, and at least one of those has to be met. All right. And so, what it actually says right now is this, and I'll paraphrase the first part, that when there is earnest money deposited in connection with a real estate transaction, that money is deposited into the broker's trust account, and the broker shall maintain that money in trust in accordance with the terms of the purchase agreement until one of the following happens. And the first one is consummation of the transaction. Transaction closes, okay? That's simple. That one's simple. The second one says the parties provide the broker with, right now it says, written instructions that both parties have signed, and they're specifying how that money is supposed to be dispersed amongst the parties, okay, pursuant to those instructions. The third one is the broker receives a copy of a final court order telling him or her how to disperse. Or the fourth one is it sits there for 2 years and it becomes unclaimed funds. All right? So here's the only thing that has changed. And as Kim likes to say, because this is really her slide, is one word in that entire section changes. And it's the word separate. So number 2 now says that the parties provide the broker with separate written instructions signed by both parties that tell the broker what's going to happen to those funds should there be a dispute. The reason we've added separate to that is because in so many cases, maybe some of you have heard this, some of you may actually operate this way right now, is that, in fact, what you're depending upon is the contract language, all right? The language in 24 is specific to when there's a dispute, though, about the way things have gone with this transaction or anything in the contract that may terminate the contract. A separate written instruction, i.e., most of you are probably using a separate release form, all right? So that when something goes a little sideways and there's a dispute about what's going to happen to the earnest money, you've got that written instruction as to we both agree that X is going to happen to the earnest money. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to Ms. Kimberly.
I'm only going to be with you for a little bit, but that's okay. Sorry I had to step out. So 4735.51, there's a new definition. It's going to define contemporaneous offers. And just like the superintendent did with the earnest money provision, I find it is helpful if we look at the actual statutory language found in 4735.51. Contemporaneous offers means offers to purchase or lease on behalf of 2 or more clients represented by the same licensee for the same property that the licensee knows, has known, or has reason to know will be taken under consideration by the owner or the owner's representation during the same period of time. So a couple things about that definition. We've had some questions come up that are very interesting. What if, so really what you're looking at, right, you have a buyer's agent who's going to prepare two offers for two separate clients that buyer's agent knows is going to be considered by the seller at the same time. Okay, so before presenting that offer, you are now required, pursuant to 4735-65, to disclose that there are contemporaneous offers, to advise that these offers will be considered by the seller or their authorized agent at the same time, and give the individual potential buyer the opportunity to seek new representation should they want to, get a referral to another agent. And the statute says that it does not violate confidentiality provisions to any client or a licensee to advise two or more potential buyers of the contemporaneous offers. Now, it also says that you have to provide this disclosure in writing. The statute doesn't say what kind of writing. I've talked to you before about, well, certified letter to tell a licensee you're sending a license back to the state. This does not require a certified letter. This requires it in writing. And so that could be an email. It could be a text. I'm not telling you that I'm advocating one particular way over another. I'm simply saying that there's not a specific requirement on how to put it in writing. Now, what if the timely disclosure can't be done in writing? You need to pick up the phone and tell someone verbally. And the statute allows for that as well, because the requirement is that it is timely done. So, what the division would recommend is if you are making such disclosure verbally, that you are then going back to your office or whenever you have the opportunity, if you have the ability on your smartphone, to send an email saying, hey, at this particular time, I made this disclosure to you of this particular contemporaneous offer. You're not disclosing the terms of the offer or the other potential buyer's name. You are just disclosing that there is another offer that's going to be considered at the same time and that you are, in fact, representing that client. A couple things that have come up, and I think they'll be included in some of the FAQs that are going to be put out by OER and also by our office. What if it's a customer? What if you're in an open house and it's not a client, it's a customer? What do you need to do? Okay, how does that get handled? The statute specifically says client. Okay, so it's really important to look at the specific language in the statute, and that's why I read the definition directly to you and encourage you to take a look at it again. Now, we are going to cover as many scenarios as we can in the frequently asked questions around this because we've had lots of questions. I feel like I kind of jipped the superintendent there, sorry.
It's just a good thing that we're able to be flexible and we both, thank goodness, know this well enough to be able to go back and forth. And I thank Kim for handling what needed to be handled out there. All right. So, real quickly here, some education specifics. And I will tell you that we actually did this course for educators separately, those who could make that one session. But this is information that, again, we think is valuable for everybody to know. Do we have any CE educators, any post-licensure instructors, anybody like that? Okay. All right. So pre-licensing courses, we've covered those well enough. Post-licensing courses, just to let you know, the way that those are approved is going to change. And the fact of the matter is that right now, if someone wants to offer the 10-hour post-licensing course, the provider, the instructor or instructors have to come before the commission and have approval for that. Now, going forward, they will actually, meaning the providers, will actually go through the same process that they go through for getting continuing education approved. And they'll apply and we will review it and work with them internally. And the superintendent will either approve it or being provided, or I'll deny it. And if it is a denial, like any other thing that the superintendent denies, those folks have the right of appeal, and they can still go before the commission and get permission to offer those if the commission sees fit. All right? Again, for new brokers, and the reason we go over this with all of you who are already licensees is because first and foremost, brokers, you may have new people coming on. Salespeople, if you're on a team leader, you just have a friend that you're bringing into it, it's really important to know these changes so that you can help them not miss something that they have to have. So still 10 hours for our brokers, and we've increased to 20 hours for salespeople after April 6th. And as far as the approval process, that will actually be promulgated through rule, all of the details that somebody has to go through. All right, continuing education. The 3-hour core course for brokers and their responsibilities will go through the exact same application process as any other type of CE does currently. And those requirements are set forth in 4735.07.141, and then again, the finer details and how to do it will be set out in rule. And then again, ultimately, bottom line is, going forward in real estate world, all education may be obtained by a distance education through an online source. All right, so here are the questions. You asked the question earlier. All right, what determines whether a new licensee has to take the 10 or the 20-hour post-sales course? Well, the date of licensure. The statute is very specific that as of the date of licensure, a new salesperson has 12 months in which to successfully complete the post-licensure requirement. So now just the hours are changing. All right, so here are a couple of examples. These are pretty self-explanatory. So Mary gets her license issued on March 28th. She clearly is before the April 6th deadline, so she'll have to complete 10 hours of post-licensure. All right? Here's the thing, though. She may decide within her first year that she'd like to sit and take all 20 hours, and that is absolutely fine. All right? That's more than what is required. What she must do, since she came in under the old law, so to speak, is she must take it in a classroom setting. She can't take it online. All right? Tom gets licensed on April 6th, and here's where a lot of people are going to be tripped up, and here's where a lot of people are going to be confused, and then ultimately probably angry with us, is because they're going to take their exam and they're going to pass it like on April 2nd or 3rd or 4th, or maybe even the 5th. But they're not going to get their license issued until the 6th or maybe the day or two after. And so the date of licensure is what triggers post-licensing. So Tom is going to be required to take the 20-hour course. All right? He then may take it either online or in a classroom setting. All right, here's another question that we've heard quite a few times leading up to these sessions, and that is, exactly how is this bill going to affect the exam questions that are on the exam for salespeople? How are they going to be tested and when? All right. So the when is the easier part to answer, and that is probably the earliest that new material will be tested would be June. All right. Likely a little after that. The how is a bit more involved, but here it is sort of in the Reader's Digest condensed version. Our testing vendor takes our outline of House Bill 532. They pull all of the old questions out of the data bank of thousands and thousands and thousands of questions. And they look at the new law material, and they'll do the same for rules once we have those promulgated, and they develop new questions, all right? There is somebody sitting at the testing vendor called a psychometrician, all right? That's a long term for, they know all the ins and outs of what exactly makes a fair and good question for a test, all right? And so they're going to work with us to develop new material, new law questions, And those questions will be inserted into the test, the exam, but they'll be pre-test. They're called pre-test questions. They're not scored, all right? So every now and then, and it may have even happened to some of you who are more newly licensed, you may have come out saying, we never covered that one question. I know that we never covered the material in that one question. Well, it may be a pre-test question. First and foremost, it did not count against your score. If you got it right, it didn't count for your score. But it was helping us measure whether or not that particular question, before we put it into the regular data bank, whether it was too easy, too many got it right, or whether it was too hard, too many people missed it. And we need to have it just right. So that's what they're working on.
So we've covered House Bill 532, what's new, what's changing, and what would a core law course be without a few reminders from the division, okay? So we're going to take an opportunity to remind brokers, salespeople in this room, situations that commonly occur and are received in the division, and sometimes get to the commission. September 29th, 2011, came a new piece of the law that said, 4735.71C says that a licensee may not act as a dual agent if the licensee is a party to the transaction, either individually or through a partnership or a company, a corporation, whether or not they are purchasing the property or selling the property. So, you say, well, of course we all know that. Well, not everybody knows that. It comes up as often as last meeting. It comes up time and time and time again. I'm a dual agent, but I am personally involved in the transaction. So it's worth taking the opportunity just to put this on the reminder slide and to reiterate, okay? Now, I don't get a lot of licensing calls unless someone is really angry. And people get angry when their license gets suspended, right? So what people tend to forget is that if I were to get licensed today as a salesperson, that on my first birthday after my licensure date, I have to renew my license. People forget that despite the fact the division sends a letter and tells them of that and reminds them that that is due. You don't have to take continuing education, but you have to renew your license on your first birthday. People continually get suspended for that very reason. And then you get things like, well, gosh, a public records request. Well, I was looking online and I was getting ready to do business with this person and it shows their license is suspended. Why is their license suspended? Because they failed to renew. And people just sometimes forget. So we're telling you, so perhaps that can be shared again with new licensees that are coming into your brokerages, so they don't forget that, because that causes a big problem, right? They've got deals, they want to get things accomplished, and then they have to go through the process of reactivating their license. Okay? Second part, if I am an active salesperson or an inactive salesperson and I get my broker's license this week, my continuing education is still due on my birthday in November. I don't get bumped out an additional 3 years because I changed the status of my license. From going to a salesperson to a broker does not change my continuing education renewal cycle. New brokers. I said I'm going to pass the broker's exam, and now I'm a new broker. What do I want to do with my license? You have to let the division know what your intentions are with that new credential. Do you want to activate your broker's license? Do you want to keep it inactive? Are you intending to stay with the company you are with? Are you opening a new brokerage? So the division needs to know how to handle that when someone takes the broker's exam and now has this credential. If we do not hear from a licensee within 30 days, the broker's license will automatically be inactivated. Now, it says on the slide, the license will be issued on the 30th day in an inactive status. We're not going to send a license out with a big inactive stamp on it, but it will show up on the division's database and on the e-license center as an inactive license. And it will be up to the broker then to determine if they want to reactivate and go through that process of filling out a transfer reactivation application and taking that extra step to activate it, and of course incurring the $25 fee to do so. We've talked about maintaining files. We've talked about 4735, 18A24. Files need to be maintained for 3 years. That includes, in the division's eyes, communications via email and text. So someone said, well, I do all of my communications with my clients via text, and now Verizon says I can no longer go and click a box and download all those texts. What am I going to do? I'm not sure. Perhaps you don't want to text anymore or find a new provider, because those texts that are going back and forth have to be maintained. They're part of that transaction. And it was a property management person who was texting back and forth, and understand that this is a profession where things are happening quickly and people want that instant communication, right, with their licensee, with their representative. They want to talk to someone. But from the division's perspective, that has to be maintained. Now, emails. The division does not going to tell you that you can't maintain your documents in an electronic format, okay? Or that you have to maintain them in a paper format. But if you're going to print out emails and put them in a paper file, please add the attachments, okay? Don't forget to print out your attachments, because if a complaint is filed and we say, hey, give us all of the documents, and you send an email that clearly shows that it had an attachment and you don't have it, that's going to be a problem, right? So we have to make sure that we say that as well. And that happens too. People are like, oh, well, I don't have the attachment anymore, and I no longer have access to that server.
Quick question on the text. If we just use texting for coordination of appointments, timing, meeting, as long as we don't use texting for the contractual details, we don't have to keep that, right?
No, you do not. But now, with that said, okay, if someone were to complain that you had an unauthorized access to a property, it might be something that you would need a text in coordinating, hey, I set that up, I have the permission to be there. Just a thought, okay? So I understand what you're saying, but there are other issues that could arise, okay? Now, on this slide, we talk about e-signature systems. All right, now, again, I'm not advocating a particular system or that you have an electronic system, but some licensees do, and a lot of them use programs like .loop. And they have saved a lot of licensees because you can go through and see a transactional audit. You can go through and see all the documents are maintained. Now, we had someone also talk about, well, if you're using a program like that and you prepare a document and send it to someone else and then make a change, the change writes over it, just like if you would a Word document. You're going to have to find a way to save your original document and then your document with changes. So just something else to bear in mind. But it has been a very useful tool that we've found for some licensees, and to be able to come back to us and say, yeah, I've got everything right here in one spot, all electronically. I can show you how it flows, who saw what first, when, where, and how. Social media, we talked about advertising and how I told you that advertising is one of the greatest areas where we see complaints. Texting, Facebook, tweets, blogging, follow the advertising rules. Make certain that you're taking a look at what's going out and that the information is not misleading, that they know what brokerage you're affiliated with, that equal prominence is taken care of. All of that needs to be part of your Facebook post if that's the way you're advertising. Or if someone, I'll see it on my own Facebook feed from people in Ohio that'll just happen to be one of my friends that I went to high school with. Check out this property. Where's your broker's information? I can't even link to it. So it's really important to take a look and make sure that all of that communication is following the requirements of 4735. Electronic signatures. The division accepts electronic signatures on documents and of course allows them in transactional documents. However, I'm here to tell you what an electronic signature is not. It is not a stamp. It is not a stamp on a piece of paper that we cannot tell who put it there, when it got there. Now you may look at me and say, well, you don't know what my wet signature got on that piece of paper. Maybe not. But isn't it more likely that if it is just a rubber stamp that someone else could have picked it up and put it on there? Stamped documents are not electronic signatures. They will not have the verification box. It's either around the signature or on a separate document. If we receive stamped documents, again, we'll be sending those back and asking for an updated signature and an updated date from the broker or the salesperson for that matter. Okay. Now, superintendent talked about 15 days notifying of a designation change for becoming a principal broker, or telling us if you're going to be an associate broker or a management level licensee. Another one, and there are several 15-day requirements, but one of them that we see a lot is the 15-day requirement of a licensee to notify the superintendent if a licensee has been convicted of a felony or a crime of moral turpitude. Okay? So, when's convicted? Convicted is the sentencing date. Okay? When one is sentenced. That doesn't mean that we'll get a phone call, well, did you know so-and-so was indicted on this? Well, thank you, we'll keep an eye on that. However, until that person is sentenced, that 15-day requirement is not going to kick in. What happens if a licensee does not notify the superintendent within 15 days of the date of sentencing? The superintendent may suspend the license of the licensee. Prior, it said that the superintendent could revoke the license of the licensee. So that has changed. It is a suspension. However, what everybody needs to understand is, even if the superintendent is notified and the person's license may remain active, that does not negate the fact that under 4735-18A, the commission shall discipline a licensee who has been convicted of a felony. It does not give the commission the opportunity or any wiggle room. That is a requirement. So they are two separate issues.
Alrighty, we wanted to touch on, and I'm going to go through these fairly quickly because after I'm done with these next two slides, we're going to ask Mr. Giller and Ms. Taylor to come on up and join us and have a little discussion. And I'm going to apologize to those over here who are close to the front because I know that this podium somewhat blocks your view of those of us at the table, but we've got microphones on the table and I think we're going to have a little discussion and do some Q&A as well. All right, so we want to touch on disclosure issues with regard to any differences between commercial, industrial, and residential property management. And I probably could hand the microphone to Mr. Giller right now because he's got plenty to say on this point. The fact of the matter is, everything that we've covered today applies to every part of practice of real estate in the state of Ohio right now. It's all covered no matter what your practice is. But specifically, these are four things, in fact, that we get a lot of questions on and or we get some complaints on. So, material facts, yes, everybody's got to disclose. Does not matter what type of property it is, does not matter what part of practice you are in real estate. The fact of the matter is, if you're aware of a material fact, it is your duty to disclose that. Agency disclosure. Absolutely. Every transaction has to have agency disclosure. And I'll touch on that a little bit more in just a second. But consumer guide, that is the only part of commercial where commercial is exempted. Okay, commercial transactions no longer require the consumer guide to agency relationships to be given to the parties. All right, that's the only part a couple of years ago that was exempted. Let me go back to agency disclosure in light of that. Here's the thing, there are any number of parties, but a good example lately, somebody said to Mr. Giller, well, that's really nice that the commission and the division of real estate are saying that commercial transactions have to have an agency disclosure when we do business with the Department of Administrative Services or with the Department of Transportation all the time, and they refuse to sign them. All right, it's no different than refusing to sign the consumer guide or any other document when you have a party. Notate it. Make a note that they refuse to sign and keep it in the transaction file. Again, like Kim said, electronically, hard copy, we do not care one way or the other. but an agency disclosure is still required for every type of transaction. The last point that I want to make on this slide is about use controls. And the way that that's come up recently is that, for example, you have a parcel or parcels of land that are zoned commercial or industrial to whatever level, and you have a residential, mainly practicing residential real estate licensee who says, I didn't get any of the disclosures because the person living on that property, oh, well, it's zoned commercial, I didn't have to do that. Okay, use controls, as Kim says, they matter, they do matter. So it doesn't matter how it's zoned, if you're working on a residential property, for instance, that is on that piece of property, you have to do the consumer guide. You have to do everything then, all right? So, got another question in the back. Yes, sir.
On the consumer guide, is it no longer required for land or multifamily of 4 units and greater?
That would be correct.
It's no longer required?
Well, the consumer guide is. Yes, the consumer guide still is, yes.
So the consumer guide is not required for commercial transactions,
That's correct.
even if they are land or multifamily of 4 units or greater.
How did we rewrite that? I think that's correct, because it's exempted over 4 units or bare land. Yeah, let's look it up.
It is
You
not
know what?
required.
Isn't that terrible?
No, it
It's
is.
been so long. That, Greg, what is it?
I think for 4 units and less it is and land, but otherwise it's not.
But for land it is.
Yes.
It is required.
It is required.
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry, it's been so long since we looked at that I couldn't remember. Good grief. All right.
Effective September 29, 2013, consumer guide pages and relationships is no longer required.
Can you talk into the mic, please?
Absolutely. Consumer guide agency is required for the sale or lease of vacant land, regardless of how it is zoned, the sale of parcel of real estate containing 1 to 4 residential units, and the leasing of residential premises if the rental or lease agreement is for a term for more than 18 months.
Okay, good.
What was the last piece?
Was about leases for 18 months or more.
It is required.
It is required.
Wow.
It is required. So it's exempting the short-term leases. I think we've got, and then down here, either one.
Did you just say
Well, wait a
that
minute, excuse me, we got her back there. No, go ahead.
If there's an estate that involves several hundred acres and has a large residence on it, which would be 9,000 square foot residence, and it's being sold, but it's also in a trust, so I think that'll take care of it, but and it's being sold as a commercial, or yes, a commercial business. What's involved there?
How is it being sold as commercial if it's a residence?
Well, what was a residence and it's being purchased for a business.
Does anybody live in it?
Not right now.
Okay. Could they live in it?
Oh, no, it was lived in at one time.
Yeah, you still have to have a consumer guide. Absolutely. Sir, right here, and then we'll come over here, sir. Yeah, hold on just a minute.
did you just say that the consumer guide is required for commercial leases longer than 18 months?
No, I did not. I said it is required for the leasing of residential premises if a rental or lease agreement. Can't hear you. Sorry. No, I said that it is required for the lease of residential premises if the rental or lease agreement is for a term of more than 18 months.
Thank you.
You bet.
We have a gentleman down here with a question.
Thank you. As an appraiser, I have run into the situation where people will use the auditors and state's land use classifications as zoning. And this is terribly wrong and can get you into deep trouble. A residential classification may be commercial, a rural classification for the auditor's purposes may be a commercially zoned or a residentially zoned or whatever, but it is not the auditor's land use classification.
Wiser words were never spoken. Thank you for that. That absolutely, absolutely. And that's really the basis for that bullet point, and the conversations that we've had around that bullet point are the fact of the matter is that you cannot always count on what is in the auditor's records, and you really need to be aware of what the actual use, or as Kim said a few minutes ago when we were talking about the question with regard to the residence that's vacant right now. If it could be, if it's inhabitable, that's the key. Yep, it's a residential unit. It could be inhabited. All right, excellent. All right, real quickly, anybody in here ever have a conversation with Kathy Clark, our licensing manager? Maybe sometimes you've got questions about folks' paperwork or whatnot. Just real quickly, we have a lot of times paperwork that's out of date. The great example I'm going to give you, believe it or not, is about 2 weeks ago, we had a salesperson application come through the front desk, and it had been completed both by the applicant and by the broker, signed and dated in September, October last year. Apparently they're not all that passionate about getting into the business right away, but be that as it may, got to make sure that things are timely dated and that things aren't out of date. The broker signing before the affiliate. We actually have had the situation where we have found out that a brokerage basically had one broker. That broker is very, very busy, rightly so, in and out a lot. So what they did was they just made a pre-signed stack of blank applications as they were recruiting new folks, and their office manager, who's not even a licensee, was just handing those out and having people fill them out and apply to be a salesperson. And of course they're dating their signature appropriately, and it's like way after the brokers. Doesn't work. Incomplete information, the wrong or a missing fee that comes in. These are all examples of things that hold up your paperwork if and when they come in. And once again, I will acknowledge that mostly in these sessions, we are preaching to the choir. You're all doing it correctly, but it bears repeating just in case. Proof your documents before you send them in. And the last one I'll mention is falsifying documents. Now, I usually say, and I truly believe that when this happens, it's done with the best of intentions. Because something needs to be filled out and completed and delivered to the division, maybe reactivation for one of your licensees, maybe a transfer into or out of your brokerage, and it's not done. And the person who needs to sign things is not there. And so somebody else fills it all out, signs it. That is not going to work, all right? That is just not going to end well, and something that needs to not happen. President Giller, Ms. Taylor, would you like to join us? Commissioner Taylor, can you give us your perspectives and or thoughts about videos and photos without permission? What have you seen lately?
I'm looking for quotes on
Pull that closer and talk loud. You're allowed to use your outdoor voice.
I'm good.
Here.
Can you hear me? Now
No, here, let's use the handheld. They are.
I'm one of the new ones on the
on the commission, and I am a lawyer, not a realtor, so this has been a really wonderful learning experience for me in many ways. But with respect to cameras and unauthorized pictures, what we're seeing is, and I could classify this as a mistake that either maybe a broker or a salesperson would make, is they're they take some shortcuts. They may leave someone alone in the house to see the house, and the person pulls out a camera and starts clicking away. You might, and that's not allowed unless you have permission of the owner of the house. So little things like that can kind of slip by you. It can may not create a problem, but it might if it shows up on somebody's Facebook and they're circulating pictures of something that they saw in the house. So I think, what I call shortcuts, that we see people that have been licensed for a long time, and because of family emergency or funeral, what have you, they've kind of cut short on their review of documents or the rules, and it's the one time they do that somebody reports it and they get in trouble. And I don't know if you have a specific topic to move from that, but one other thing that I see as important is when we see the applicants for new licensee, they take the test, and at the bottom you get your sponsoring broker. That reflects on whoever that sponsoring broker is. If we get, and quite honestly, I'm amazed, a lot of the applicants for the exams have felonies, serious felonies, fraud, forgeries, and when we see that, we're thinking, surely if they check the box, the broker, the sponsoring broker would have asked them questions, and there was a reason why they, decided to sponsor them. Well, I think in our collective opinions would be that the broker should be there to explain why you sponsored someone that has felonies. There may be very good reasons, but otherwise we're thinking that this slip by was just a rubber stamp kind of a situation, and all of these things reflect on the broker that's responsible. As sponsoring a candidate, a lot of the problems that the sales agent comes in and is in front of the commission. Is the broker taking ownership of what happened there? Are you making sure that they're reading the compliance manual? There's a lot that I think as you get larger entities and lots more salespeople, it's hard to keep track of everybody. But the bottom line is that's your role, that's your duty. And that's the reason we're seeing people is they kind of go off on their own and do their own thing, and that's when trouble starts to happen.
Excellent. And if you have anything you want to add on the videos, photos, but I'm going to ask you, President Gilder, to talk about what you've seen over the last 7 years and continue to see with regard to lockbox issues.
It amazes me. I don't sell houses. I've never sold a house, not one house. I use a licensee to buy my house when I buy my personal residence. I'm a commercial broker. I just focus on commercial land development, apartments, and things of that nature. But what amazes me is how many people are willing to give out the lockbox code to their friend, to somebody because they can't make it there on time, and things happen. Our job and our responsibility is to trust that someone gives us to be in their house without supervision. We're supposed to be the supervising people when we go into those homes, but yet we're willing to give out a lockbox code. Some of us, not all of us, but some of us, and then take whatever comes of that on chance. You give the lockbox code, the person leaves the door unlocked, and someone comes in and steals something from the house. Well, who's the last person who supposedly had the lockbox code? Well, it's you. So I think those are some of the things that we're seeing. And as Commissioner Taylor said, I don't sell houses. I'm not on Facebook. I don't Twitter. I don't do any of that stuff. My kids do it. I don't even know what it is, to be honest with you, for the most part. But it's amazing to me of how many people go into a house, take a video of a house, think it's okay to turn around, put that video on YouTube, and then the person finds, why is my house on YouTube? I didn't get permission for that. the next thing you know, they're in front of us. I take a fairly strong position on that. I take a fairly strong position on most of the things that people can change. And so that, and I also believe, as Commissioner Taylor indicated, all of these things, I understand. I've been a broker for 20 years. I understand the responsibility and the relationship between a broker and a salesperson. However, I also believe there's more responsibility and guidance that should be given by the broker. When a salesperson comes in front of us, if you think as a broker that's an isolated, independent incident from you, you're incorrect. First thing I think of is, I wonder if we've been in and audited that broker, right, in the last years. And that's the first thing I think of and the first question I ask, because if this one individual is doing this without knowing there's such a thing as a consumer guide, how many other people in that operation are getting that same guidance? So if you think as a broker, oh, that's just a salesperson, they're in an independent contractor relationship, always remember, independent contractor relationship is a tax question, an employment question. It has nothing to do with the broker, the real estate, the licensing responsibility. And so I look at that and I take that very seriously, and it is the first thing that comes up when something severe happens. Is I wonder what the broker knew about this, and where are they in this, and then state sitting right there to say, well, we either are going to audit or have started an audit on that company. So when you think it's separate, it's really not separate in my eyes. I'm just one, but in my eyes.
So I don't, and I hate to cut either one of you off, so I'm going to ask you actually to talk about your perspective, because the bottom bullet on this slide is not cooperating with the division. And both of you, along with the other three commissioners, have a very strong opinion, and you've made that strong opinion known through your decisions. When somebody ignores a request for an interview during an investigation, doesn't respond to the notice that they've got a complaint against them, doesn't respond, maybe even to a subpoena at some time.
I would say as a lawyer, this gets you off to on the wrong footing, because the commission is quasi-judicial entity, and honestly, the real estate department and the folks there are wonderful, and they know their stuff, and they're trying to help you sort through a problem and get to a resolution. They're not trying to pin you up against the wall or publicly embarrass you. It's solving a problem. Someone reported a complaint, so it's in your best interest to cooperate. And I would also add, from a legal perspective, is if you hire legal counsel, which is sometimes probably not a bad idea, make sure that your lawyer has the right attitude as well, because there's some lawyers that come in and they act like they're in a court of law, and it's not the same thing. And attitude plays very heavily in the way things take place. I mean, it's part of your reaction as human beings, anything else. But respect is in terms of what we wear into the commission meetings, as well as your behavior. There are a lot of things that have an impact on the way people are going to view you. And if you're a professional, and you should dress and act like a professional at all times, even in those meetings.
In my position, as maybe you can kind of figure out from what I've said before, I have no tolerance for that. So if you're not going to participate in the process, you shouldn't be a licensee. It's just as easy as that, right? You make your living at this. It's the process that we all have to go through. There's rules and regulations. There's things you agree to. There's things we agree to as licensees. And we make our living at this. So if there's an issue, you just deal with the issue, right? It made a mistake, fine, participate. If you don't participate, it's simple. I have no tolerance. I would always move to revoke the license, just because that's my position when you're not willing to participate in the process.
I think you can also look at this as a learning experience sometimes too. Now, I think there's an assumption for most of the people that are on commission that you should know the basics when you're in violation. Something that you did verbally or maybe you didn't do anything wrong. But to me, that's important to recognize it. Like, one problem we have in front of us a lot of times is the trust funds. Now, to me, that's fundamental. Everybody should know what a trust fund is for and how it should be used. I mean, the word trust. Like says, oh, yeah, we have that situation where people come in and they ask them where your trust fund is, and they're, what's that? I don't know what they do with their money, but anyway, those are important concepts. And then one last thing.
Yep.
Another short term I have for some of the problems we've seen is respect the house. You don't open the well, if you open the cabinet and somebody wants to look at something, but if you need an aspirin, go back to your office and get it. And no one should be going in and taking medicines.
That would be, what's that bullet that she's talking about right now?
And
And
similarly,
we've had several of them.
shouldn't be sleeping in the bed or napping in the beds that are there. And also, if there's trash, or what you think is trash, leave it there. The owner of the house may not think it's trash. So don't walk off. We had someone that thought someone was going to have a garage sale, and they were piling things up in the garage, and they picked up one small item. That got them in front of us. And there was a complaint that there was a theft. And they filed a police report.
Yeah, because, as most of you know, what are a lot of sellers utilizing now? Cameras, nanny cams, everywhere. So, absolutely, that is a fact. Well, commissioners, thank you very much, and I'm going to keep you up here, but we only have 5 minutes left, and I know that they're all glued to their seats because they want the codes for CE. I know how our minds work. A couple of other things I want to mention very, very quickly. Teams. Teams are not brokerages. Leaders of teams, unless they are licensed as a broker, are not brokers. And we're having issues. Oh, Mr. Ratchek.
That just came up in the meeting the other day. Has there been any thought that if there are teams, that one of those team members or leader is a broker?
Well, okay, so Mr. Ratchek, because I'm going to indulge him and not make him wait for a mic, asked, has there been any conversation about requiring the team leader, or at least one member of the team, to be a broker? That has come up a few times around the state right now. So I'm going to guess that before too terribly long, we're going to have some other things to amend into the license law. Ultimately, we'll see whether or not that can get traction. I think that I would probably rightfully speak for at least most of the commission, and certainly for myself. So maybe I should just say personally, to me, that's the way we should move. That's the way we should move. But we'll see how that goes. Ancillary trustee, that is one last thing that I want to mention before I give you your course code and see if we have any other questions. And that is because up until about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, the law stated that the only applicability for an ancillary trustee was in the event that a sole broker died, passed away, and we needed somebody to wrap up the business of that particular brokerage, all right? Because we have the details underpinning these canons of ethics violations that we note here. If you want examples, if you want detail under any of our graphs, our statistics, please let us know. We will give these to you. They're in the public domain, all right? We just ask that you give us attribution. But other than that, these are all the things that not only might there be a 4735.18A charge, but they could be charged separately just under a canons of ethics violation. And so there they are. So any last questions? Yes, sir.
You were talking about ancillary.
Ancillary.
Is there a form that you guys can just develop and put on the thing that you can fill out?
There is.
I mean, that would be kind of cool to have. Just
Yeah, and actually, I thought that it was still available on the website. You may have to search for it a little bit, but it's there. If you have any difficulty getting to that, first and foremost, let me say that our general email, which Ashley takes care of mainly, is webreel@com for commerce, .state.oh.us. And you can email us there, and the appropriate person will get that, and we'll help you out with whatever your question is or whatever you need. All right? And so it's webreel@com.state.oh.us. All right? And we do tweet, so follow us on Twitter. All right, and I want to thank our commissioners who were here with us today. Pretty much across the board, we've had commissioners with us while we've been on the road, and it's been great. I think you should all know who they are and have a chance to hear from them.